Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about a film that's by director Damien Chazelle. He's known for directing La La Land and Whiplash, and he also directed the film First Man about the life of Neil Armstrong. But this is his most recent film I'm going to review for you today. It's called Babylon. It is currently in theaters. I don't know how much longer it's going to be in theaters. I heard it's not doing super well financially in the box office. But in this film, Babylon, you guys, if you don't know anything about this, it's basically Damien Chazelle's epic about 1920s Hollywood, about how the silent film era was kind of pushed to the side once the talkie films started to make it big within the industry. How people no longer just wanted these goofy little movies where Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton are doing something goofy for whatever length of time, and there's absolutely no sound. There's just a occasional subtitle card every once in a while. So this is around the time where people are starting to want more things out of their movies. They want to be able to see people talk in them. They want to have sound in them. They want Hollywood is starting to recognize at this point in time how much more of a story they're able to tell if they have sound and people talking in them. And this film also depicts how when you have a talkie movie, you're able to do more with your work, but at the same time, because talkies are able to do so much more than a silent film, that people who were once working on silent films now feel threatened, and they're not able to just get away with doing something goofy on a set for an hour or two. That there's a lot more work that is going to have to go into films now. People are going to expect more from films now, and so this movie's kind of about that transition, how that helped certain people, that didn't help certain people. Actors and actresses had to be aware of how they spoke, how they moved around. They were much more aware of all the further tasks and further responsibilities they now had going into the talkie era. And the film also depicts how that kind of put a lot on directors. There was more jobs that needed to be had. More people had to be, there's actually someone just dedicated to sound and stuff like that. The film also is about how drug addiction and gambling can really ruin your life if not handled correctly. There's one character in particular played by Margot Robbie that really is about this in full swing. It really does depict how, one moment you're famous, one moment, everybody wants to work with you, but the next second, if you're gambling, the next second your drug addiction goes off the rails. Your career can go down a huge spiral really quickly. And there's one event in the movie that I can't spoil because it would be a spoiler, but there is something she does at one point that really does cement that she will not be working in the industry anymore. Um, and all these things happen over the course of Babylon. It shows the ups and downs of the silent film to talkie era, and how things like drug addiction and gambling can ruin your life very quickly if not taken care of and not getting therapy for that person in a very quick manner too. But overall, guys, I really enjoyed Babylon. There's certainly some things about this movie that I'll talk about my negatives that didn't completely work for me, but for the parts that did work for me, I really enjoyed this a lot. This is a subject matter that's always kind of intrigued me, how people like Charlie Chaplin and people like Buster Keaton, how they had to transition from silent movies over to the talkies, and what kind of work went into that, what kind of thing do they felt that they provided to the industry that could transition well into talkies, with Charlie Chaplin going from, playing the tramp in silent films, and how he went from the dictator and giving a full-blown speech in a movie. How did Buster Keaton transition and all this kind of stuff. And all that stuff's really fascinating to me. With me having a passion for film too, it's obviously just very easy for me to get into a story involving how film is always changing. Film is always finding the next big thing. We recently just had Avatar 2, The Way of Water come out, and that kind of changed the industry even more with motion capture, and how James Cameron expanded moving for motion capture along even further, so even more movies moving forward can use that technology even more, and it can advance their story even more. So this film's ultimately about that, how the transitions of films can be both a good and a bad thing, specifically for certain people, and about how drug addiction and gambling can both ruin your life really quickly if not taken care of very, very, very quickly. But overall, guys, from my positives and negatives of Babylon, the film ultimately depicts the ups and downs of Hollywood in a very strong fashion, and then this is absolutely true. Um, there's a lot of characters that we're introduced to, like Brad Pitt as this actor, Margot Robbie as this actress, who has, drug addiction problems and stuff. We meet a young man who's basically becomes a film producer in Hollywood. We meet him early on as he's kind of working in, like a gardening job and stuff like that. So we follow several different people over the course of this movie. I would say Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, and the guy we meet at the beginning are kind of the three most significant ones. And so the film depicts. We also meet a character that's also impacted by the fact that he's a black man working in Hollywood in the 20s, and we get to follow kind of his story as well. But ultimately, the film does depict the ups and downs of Hollywood in a strong fashion. It shows, how Hollywood can really, if handled correctly, if you really bring something to the industry that's unique and new, it can, make you the ultimate person you could never thought you could possibly be. But on the downside, it's also a place that can ruin your life. That if you are not up to par with the way the industry wants you to be, it will just plummet you to the ground in every way imaginable. If you feel phased out as an actor, if you have an addiction that's so bad and you don't want to deal with an international market, or if you don't want to deal with how people perceive your race in a movie, or if you don't want to deal with, this young man like that the film follows throughout the movie, how he's this, young immigrant man, trying to adapt to this industry where it's all these, older white men telling him what to do and stuff like that, and him, having to adapt to giving directions to people that are just absurdly awful. And the film depicts all these things. It depicts all the good stuff, all the bad stuff, and I feel like Damien Chazelle has a perfect blend of both worlds, because Hollywood, for me personally too, for someone who's never even been in the industry, but it really is a place where the best things that could possibly happen to you could happen, and the absolute worst things that can happen to you can also happen in it too. And I feel like Damien Chazelle captures both sides of that world. The film also shows the life cycle of an actor and an actress in a strong manner. How one moment, you're the most beautiful person, everybody wants to be with you, everybody wants to work with you, you're landing all the projects in the world. But all that can change very quickly. That can change by public behavior. That can change by a story that makes it to the press. That could change by a way you're approaching your acting career that's outdated, and people don't like the way you speak in a film anymore, and how one moment you're on top of the world and the next second you're just at the very bottom. Nobody wants to work with you. The only work you can find is stuff that people admit is extremely mediocre and not good. And once again, the film depicts the life cycle of all the goods and the bads of actors and actresses, how sometimes you can get the most incredible work, everybody wants to work with you, and there's also times where everything is mediocre, nobody wants to work with you, and the few works that you do find are just not very good. And so I feel like the life cycle of this performing person, that actor or actress, is depicted in this film in a very strong manner. I thought it was very well handled. I also like how the film depicts how silent films to talkies, how that transition, how that occurred and how interesting it was. All the things that had to occur about people who were, once had to show up to a set in a silent film, just had to do a couple of goofy things for a couple hours. Now have to find out, how do I speak in these movies? What further can I bring besides just doing an occasional goofy little thing and just saying an occasional sentence? What more can I bring to the table that can really bring this story and this, film to life for audiences? And so I think it's very interesting how the film depicts how a lot of people had to make that transition at the time, and how that was both a very tough and a very good transition, depending on who you're looking at and what career you were pursuing in Hollywood at the time. And I feel that the film depicts both of these worlds in a very accurate way. And overall, there's strong performances all across the board here. Brad Pitt, once again, gives an excellent performance here. Margot Robbie is great in this movie. There's a lot of times where you're really not supposed to like Margot Robbie, but the way she depicts her character, the way you can tell she's frustrated about certain things, all that is very strong. Damien Chazelle always seems to get really good performances out of his actors and actresses, and this is no exception. Everybody across the board is very strong in this movie. Acting-wise, I really had no complaints with the film. But for my negatives of Babylon, and why I might not put it up there with like a La La Land or a Whiplash as far as Damien Chazelle's films go, is the film's tone really is all over the place. This is a film, and based on, I'm sure, everything you just heard me talk about, this is a film that really is all over the place. There's times where you're happy, where the characters are happy. There's times where you're sad and the characters are sad. There's times where the film is supposed to be extremely funny. There's times where the film almost kind of goes in the horror direction where you're taken into a room or you're taken into a place of something of really, really terrible, of somebody who was led down a really terrible path. The film really is all over the place. There's times where I would even have a hard time distinguishing what genre this film is. I think overall it's a drama, but like I said, there's times where it's supposed to be really funny. There's times where it's supposed to be really scary. It's just a film where the tone is just all over the place. Even going from the first act to the second act, if I can maintain my voice here, the tone is just all over the place. There's times where, like I said, you see a person at the very top form, and you see people where, they're at the bottom of the barrel and they're in a really terrible, horrific situation. And I don't know, there's just times where the film's tone is just all over the place. And I really wish they found a way to kind of complement those scenes together more. The happy and the sad, the scary and the funny. If they really want to have all of these things combined into one, the film has to be able to complement them and make them feel all consistent with each other. And there's just times with this film where the tone just does not feel consistent with that. Overall, too, I think the film is about 45 minutes too long. This really does feel like a director's cut film of a film that I would probably like better if it was trimmed down a little bit more. And once again, I get it. There's long movies. People want to keep all their footage when they're making a film. But I really do believe in a theatrical cut and a director's cut. A director's cut is strictly for films like this where the directors thought, 3 hours is enough to get the story told that they want. But with a theatrical cut of a movie, it makes it, more digestible. You can get the audience in and out of the theater faster. There's just a lot of aspects of this film where I just don't see why they needed more than 2.5 hours to tell the story that they wanted. And all that really could have been taken care of with a really good editor that really could have just trimmed the film down a little bit more. This is just a film where everything it's trying to do, I think, could be told in like 2 hours, 20 minutes at tops. I really don't get why it needed 3 hours. That's a perfect runtime for maybe a director's cut, but not necessarily a theatrical cut for a film like this. The story's second half, I also feel, once again, going back to tone, it has a very dark shift in where it's trying to go. And I get, once again, there's people in the story that are going down a path that's not good, that's clearly not going to benefit their career. But I feel like, once again, it feels like a very different movie. It feels like almost feels like you're going from a straight up comedy to something like you saw earlier in 2022, like Barbarian, where it's extremely dark and you really don't know where it's going to go. So the second half of the film, I thought the dark shift in tone was just a little too much. Also, the film's messages and themes, they're all here. That definitely depicts how film is always changing. It's always changing both for the better and for the worse. But there's a lot of themes and messages here where, though I understood it, though the friends I saw this film with seem to understand it as well, a lot of those messages feel kind of muddled to me. They just kind of feel like they're there. They exist. If you digest the film and depict it, and dissect it enough, you can find them. But some of those messages and themes are just very, very muddled. And they're there, but they're not told very clearly at times. But overall, I'm going to give Babylon an 8.5 out of 10. It's a very, very good movie. There's tons of things I love about this movie, but there's a ton of things about this movie I don't like either. Though I think La La Land is probably my favorite Damien Chazelle film, and probably Whiplash will be my second of his. This is probably a strong third, though, for me, just because there is a lot of problems with it. There is a lot of things I like, but it's just depicted in a way and told in a way that's so long and has a hard time making its point where I don't know if I would rewatch it as much as, say, like a La La Land or something like that. But 8.5 out of 10 for me. There's a lot of things about Babylon that I really like. Enough for me to recommend it to you. But go into this film knowing that it's not perfect. There's certain things about it I think could be improved upon. But overall, 8.5 out of 10 for me. Really liked Babylon, and I do recommend seeing it.